info. She is talking about ghosts hanging around what some say is a real-life haunted house in Metro Detroit.
Haunted houses pop up all over the place this time of year.
A new Wall Street Journal report profiles the many parents who think they can see ghosts, specters, and mysterious movements on their advanced baby monitors.
Baby crib.
I freaked out. I stopped what I was doing and I ran upstairs and I grabbed my daughter.
Heather says this so-called ghost scratched her daughter Lily and attacked her too.
You are tuned in to the Ghost Signal. Hello and good morning or evening wherever you are across the 24 time zones, and welcome to the Ghost Signal. My name is Jeff, and I will be your control operator, your Sultan of Spooky, your trail guide through cemeteries and solver of puzzle boxes. This is episode 12, The Doctor is In, where we will hear one family's strange tale of living in a haunted house, but instead of making them leave or leaving themselves, they have learned to coexist with their spirits. This will be another episode like the last, without any other segments, just a whole bunch of dead air. A few announcements before we begin. If you have a true ghost story for the Graveyard Shift segment, or a twisted tale of terror for the Light in the Attic Patreon segment, please send it to the ghostsignalpodcast@gmail.com or visit the ghostsignalpodcast.com and submit them there. If I read it on the show and you include a mailing address with your submission, I will send you a Ghost Signal sticker, a 3 a.m. sticker, business cards, Jimmy Hoffa's toupee, a unicorn horn, and maybe even the Colonel's secret recipe of 11 herbs and spices, even though it's not really a secret anymore. But you won't know until you try. The mailbox is empty, dear listeners. The Ghost Signal Patreon is live if you so wish to contribute to the show in that way. There is a $1 tier called the Spirit tier, where you can listen to episodes ad-free on the same day as the regular episode releases. And there is a $5 tier called the Spectre tier, in which you also gain access to ad-free versions of the episodes, but also a Light in the Attic, where I narrate creepypastas from all across the internet, where you can take a peek behind the curtain of the Ghost Signal. Are you a spirit or a spectre? Go to www.patreon.com/the Ghost Signal Podcast and choose the tier that's right for you. There is also a Discord server for the Ghost Signal. Discord is free to join, so feel free to jump in anytime to say hi and interact with other listeners who share a taste for the paranormal. Go to theghostsignalpodcast.com and scroll down until you see the link. Click on the link, then click on the Join Server button, then click on the Join Now button and you're in. So, download the Discord app, create your free account, and come hang out with us on the Ghost Signal Podcast server today. In Fort Gibson, Oklahoma, the oldest town in the state, is a Victorian-style house that was built in 1895 by Dr. George McBride. The good doctor was the toast of the town, and in his beloved home he hosted lavish parties for the town elite, and some say he still does. This is the story of one family's cohabitation with entities most people don't even believe exist. But Cindy Back believes, and challenges those who don't to visit her home and leave as skeptical as they did when they arrived. Because for the past 40 years, she and her family have lived with the ghostly inhabitants of the McBride house and have endured their antics for better and for worse. This is their story. Prepare for dead air.
Dead air.
In 1824, the military installation at Fort Gibson was established, making it the oldest European settlement in the state. At first, it was occupied by the Dragoons, who were originally a class of mounted infantry who used horses for mobility but dismounted to fight on foot. They got their peculiar moniker from the short muskets they carried called dragons, which in turn got their name from the blast that emitted from the barrel when fired. After them, it was occupied by the Confederate Army, then the Union Army. It had 3 well-known people stationed there in its early years, one being Zachary Taylor, Fort Commander and later 12th President of the United States. It was here that he met his future son-in-law and future President of the Confederacy, Jefferson Davis. Sam Houston was also stationed here, future President of the Republic of Texas and namesake for the city that bears his name. George McBride was born on August 4, 1865 in Charleston, Missouri to William, or W.D., and Maddie McBride. W.D. had served under General Jeff Thompson in the Confederate Army and following George's birth relocated to Fort Gibson. George McBride attended Cane Hill College in Nashville, Tennessee, receiving his degree in 1884. He returned home to Fort Gibson and got right to setting up his practice. Mary Norman, a full-blooded Cherokee woman, graduated from the Cherokee National Female Seminary in neighboring Tahlequah. She was a student of the last class to graduate from that school before it burned down. It is not known how they met, but George and Mary eventually did, and in 1887 they were married. Dr. McBride bought a piece of land directly across from the old military fort, and on it he had built his new wife a home fit for royalty. During the construction of the house, he was incredibly meticulous about every single detail. Every single piece of material that was to be used had to pass his inspection. Every board, window, and nail had to be approved. He was also a member of a secret society known as the Oddfellows Lodge 126, and worked some of its symbology into the house's railings and banisters. The house has 16 rooms, a massive foyer with a fireplace and beveled glass doors, and 14-foot-high ceilings. The rooms in the back of the house were designed to house live-in servants, and when the house was completed, he hired a maid, a butler, and a cook to care for himself and his beloved bride. George had everything he could want: money, love, stability, and comfort. But still something was missing. A child. Unable to have one of their own, they decided to adopt, and sent an application to a large orphanage in Chicago. They had very specifically requested a 2-year-old boy with brown hair and brown eyes. Their application was approved, and their request was met in very short order. They began preparing a room for their new little boy, and sent a private nurse to Chicago to bring the child home. When she returned, in her arms was a 2-week-old blue-eyed baby girl. George was immediately enamored, named her Alberta, and raised her to adulthood. George passed away on May 24, 1938, followed shortly by Mary on March 20, 1941. They are both buried in Harlington, Oklahoma in Russ Lawn Cemetery. The house then passed through the hands of 7 residents, some of whom were high-ranking officers of the nearby fort. Then in June of 1982, Dr. Chris Back was looking for a place to start his family. He had just completed his own medical training in Florida and wanted to be close to his parents as well as his wife Cindy's parents. They loved the town because it was so full of history, with the added bonus that the small community had no other doctors. When he saw the McBride house, it was love at first sight. They both wanted an old house with a strong history, and Cindy couldn't believe his luck. It was a unique fixer-upper opportunity, and although it needed some love, they both felt it was a great place to raise their son Frostin and begin the next chapter of their lives. They moved in that July. It wouldn't be long before they knew they were not alone. It started off small, as it always does. While little Frostin napped, Cindy would hear footsteps walking up and down the hallways and staircases, doors and kitchen cabinets opening and closing, and cold spots all throughout the house. Soon she even began hearing whispering, and an occasional child crying. On rare occasions she would smell heavy cigar smoke or a floral perfume for no reason. The feeling of being watched was constant. The activity in the house started to become unrelenting. Cindy would walk into Frostin's room to find him wrapped up in a blanket that was not in the crib with him when she put him to sleep. Whenever she tried to cook a meal in the kitchen, she would have to have 2 of everything because invariably something would go missing as her back was turned. When she brought up her thoughts that the house might be haunted, Chris blamed it on the creaks and groans old houses make as they expand and contract. She knew that all doctors are taught to think on scientific terms and would never believe her. As the old saying goes though, seeing is believing. And that's what it took for Dr. Chris Back to believe in ghosts. The 3 of them all went out for a day of shopping and fun. Nobody had been in the house all day. Upon returning, Cindy went to put an already asleep Frostin down for a nap. She asked Chris to go with her so he could pull back his covers in an attempt not to wake him. When they entered the room, they saw that all the nursery books had been taken out of the bookcase and stacked in several piles throughout the room. Chris asked her if she had done it before they went shopping, and Cindy wanted to smack him. He had to concede that their 113-year-old house might be haunted. As the days, weeks, and months wore on, they discovered that there were 4 permanent ex-residents coexisting with them in the house. The first they encountered was the little girl. She could be heard calling for her mama all throughout the house. Could it have been Frostin? Sure, but a mother knows the sound of her own child's voice. Still, she wasn't quite sure if the spirit was a boy or a girl. One day as Cindy was reading Frostin a pre-nap story, something new happened. As she was reading to him, she noticed his attention started to wander. When she asked him what he was looking at, he simply replied, "The girl." She was caught off guard, and while trying to gather her thoughts, Frostin turned his head sharply to his dresser, followed immediately by a box of crayons, knocking itself onto the floor. This terrified her so bad that she had to leave. She handed Frostin over to Chris, got in her car, and drove around aimlessly for hours. When she finally returned, it was dinner time. After they all had a nice Italian dinner, they retired to the dining room to relax with a couple hours of TV before bed. The earlier events of the day having been all but forgotten, at least until the television set began turning itself off and then on again. This little prank became one of the ghost's favorite activities and continues to this day. Fast forward to 3 years after move-in. It was midwinter. Cindy was baking cinnamon rolls and had just finished making Frostin a cup of hot cocoa. The house was warm and inviting. She brought her son his mug of chocolatey goodness when he asked her who the man was that he saw walking from the stairs to the bathroom. Completely confused, she asked him to describe the man. He told Cindy that he was very tall, dressed in a black suit, brown hair, a white shirt with a funny tie, and a tall hat like his daddy had. The hat Frostin was referring to was a top hat that Chris would wear when he was doing Civil War reenactments at the fort. Upon her son's insistence, she proceeded to search for her phantom visitor. All she found was water faucets turned off that she had intentionally left on just a little bit to keep the pipes from freezing and bursting. While she was resetting the faucets, she realized Frostin had described Dr. McBride to a T, even though he had never seen a picture of him in his life. For the rest of the day, she fought to keep the faucets on, but as soon as she left the room, be it the kitchen or one of the bathrooms, they turned themselves off again. Eventually, she gave up and hoped for the best, but it was not meant to be. Around 2 a.m., the kitchen pipes burst. It wasn't long after Dr. McBride made his presence known that the late-night party started. At about 2 a.m., Chris and Cindy would wake up to sounds of conversation and laughter coming from the living room downstairs. Drink glasses could be heard clinking together and the footsteps of several people shuffling about as if party guests were mingling. Chris would go to investigate, but as soon as he got to the first landing, the party stopped. He would sometimes yell at the spirits to knock it off, that he had to work in the morning. It is very well known that Dr. McBride loved his parties, his whiskey, and his cigars. His cigar smoke could be faintly detected by Cindy when he made an appearance, but strangely never Chris. She also detected a subtle floral perfume from time to time, but its source eluded her. For a while, anyway. One night, as Cindy was just getting settled into bed and reached over to her lamp to turn it off, she found herself staring face to face with a woman in her doorway. She was very pretty and wore a white Victorian dress with her hair done up in a Gibson Girl-style bun. The smell of rose-scented perfume overwhelmed Cindy. This spirit raised an arm and motioned for Cindy to follow, which out of sheer curiosity she would have done if she wasn't frozen with fear. Then the woman simply turned around, started walking away, and vanished. Cindy could not believe what she had just seen and did not go to bed that night after all. Not long after, Cindy's sister Cassie came to visit with her 2 daughters, Anita and Rebecca. On the very first night of their visit, Cindy was woken up by the screaming of her sister. She had just seen the Victorian lady standing over her girls as they slept. She explained to a rattled Cassie that the Victorian lady seemed to be a gentle protector of children, at least that's the vibe she got from it, and that there was no harm meant to the children. This seemed to calm Cassie down enough to keep her from instantly fleeing the house. So far they had identified 3 spirits: the Victorian lady, Dr. McBride, and a child. 1 remained. On a slightly chilly and shadowy September morning in 1990, Cindy gave birth to their second child at Oklahoma State University Hospital in Tulsa. The couple had decided to name their new daughter after a plantation in Natchez, Mississippi, one that Cindy had picked out as her favorite during family trips there over the past few years, Devereaux. After they brought her home, the spirits left her alone for the most part. Occasionally, Cindy would find Devereaux's crib pushed several feet from where it was supposed to be, with Devereaux inside. Fast forward another 3 years. It's now 1993 for those of you keeping score. Cindy was in the dining room one evening doing chores when she heard Devereaux's little feet coming down the stairs. She informed Cindy that a little boy was in her room, playing with her toys, and would not leave. Cindy reasoned with her daughter, telling her that she would go upstairs and tell the little boy to leave. In all honesty, she had no idea what to expect. As she crept up the stairs, she could hear someone in Devereaux's room playing with her toys. But as she got close, all the sounds stopped, as that's what usually happened when she got too close to the ghosts. Later, Devereaux told her that she thought the little boy was an angel because he glowed. She described him to Cindy as a brown-haired little boy wearing a white shirt and jacket and suspenders on his pants. That's when Devereaux's Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer toy became sentient. With no rhyme or reason to its activity, it would start randomly singing Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer at all hours of the night, even after the batteries were removed. As it turns out, this particular toy is the ghost children's favorite toy, and it still is. This finally brought the count to 4, but that didn't mean others didn't show up from time to time, and one in particular was quite a nasty customer. It was mid-January now, and all the Christmas decorations had been stored away. Living in the McBride house meant going all out for the holidays, so the knickknacks and ornaments were bountiful. They could have filled a medium-sized U-Haul, so it's no surprise that one got missed when they were packing them away for the next year. Cindy found a little gingerbread man ornament that January day and placed it on an antique side table in the living room. There it stayed until later that night. They were all 4 having a pleasant dinner in the dining room when, without warning, the gingerbread man ornament launched itself across the room and hit the dining room doors. It soon began launching dishes and silverware if someone was standing in the kitchen, narrowly missing them by inches. The house began to have a dark feel to it. Cindy eventually commanded whatever spirit was causing the trouble to leave immediately and never return. When she did, doors upstairs started repeatedly slamming themselves shut, and things began falling to the floor. The next day, the parlor began to smell rancid, almost like a really stinky cheese. Chris said the smell reminded him of decay, and it was so pungent that the parlor was all but sealed off. And it was spreading. It had started to invade the upstairs alcove, and since it was a main walkway, it could not be closed off, so they begrudgingly tried to ignore it until it eventually went away. One night soon after, Chris found himself alone in the house for the night. Around 3 a.m., he awoke to a terrible screaming coming from somewhere in the house. He ran out of his bedroom to investigate, but was unable to find the source, despite Tom the cat and Winston the bulldog running up and down the stairs, chasing something invisible to Chris. After the screaming finally stopped, he wanted desperately to go back to bed. When he returned to his room, he found his entire bedroom door was covered in slime. It was colorless, odorless, and Chris determined it to be alcohol-based because it evaporated almost as soon as it touched his hands. The house seemed to be getting darker. Some mornings, Cindy would be getting ready for the day when something would grab her wrists with force, and then suddenly release her. She said it felt like someone had put invisible blood pressure cuffs on her. Then, just as they were about to reach their breaking point, it stopped. The house was light again. The normal, non-threatening paranormal activity resumed, and life returned to the Back family as close to normal as they could get. It almost seemed as if the house spirits had finally chased whatever had invaded out for good. In the late 1990s, an inexplicable phenomenon occurred. Everyone in the world became obsessed with strange little 6-inch balls of fur with owl beaks and oversized eyes. They were called Furbies, and after the craze had died down a bit, everyone in the family had one. They would all sit their Furbies down in a circle and watch them all have very spirited conversations in their strange native language. Eventually and inevitably, the 4 Furbies were put away to closets and toy boxes and forgotten. One night, years later, as Cindy had taken the kids to Richmond, Virginia on a little trip before the next school year started, Chris had found himself alone in the house yet again as a bad thunderstorm rolled through the area, keeping him from sleeping. He decided a book would help him get back to sleep, and I can't blame him. Reading does the same thing to me. Just as he was about to doze off, he heard something on his bookcase say cock-a-doodle-doo. His Furby, whose batteries had long since been removed, had woken up. It began singing and rocking back and forth with nothing to power it. Chris was mortified, trying in futility to come up with a reasonable explanation. His train of thought wasn't on the tracks for very long because from Devereaux's room he heard the familiar cock-a-doodle-doo coming from her toy chest. Frantically, he dug it out and stared in disbelief as it started singing and dancing as well. Next, Froston's woke up, and then Cindy's. As the thunder and lightning raged outside, a grown man, all alone in a haunted house, watched his 4 Furbies, half with dead batteries, half with no batteries at all, and that had been dormant for 3 years, sit in a circle having a conversation with themselves. He had never seen anything so bizarre in his life. And that, dear listeners, spirits and specters, is why I've always hated those things. They've been plotting on us the whole time. Months later, Halloween approached. As Cindy was decorating the house, she had a strange idea. What if she opened up her house for ghost tours on Halloween night? Maybe her house ghost would make an appearance once or twice and convince a skeptic or two that spirits are real. She decided to do it, and began the planning phase. How to decorate, what the tour would actually entail, and advertising. Cindy had in short order let the Halloween ghost tours take over her thoughts. Chris just smiled and went along with it. Happy wife, happy life, right? She went all out with decorating that year, buying licorice and candy apple-scented candles and placing them all over the house. Wooden ghosts, witches, and vampires pervaded the whole house. Flickering flame bulbs were placed in the foyer chandelier, with skulls perched on top and animatronic bats fluttering about. It was the perfect haunted mansion. Cindy even explained to the 4 spirits what she was up to and asked if they could be more active when the tours were going through. And strangely enough, they obliged. When the time came, neither Chris nor Cindy thought many people would be interested, let alone show up. Boy, were they wrong. The line of people wanting to take a tour of an actual haunted house stretched around the block. Chris, Cindy, the 2 kids, and even Cindy's mother, who incidentally hated the house and its spirits, began taking people through the house in groups of 12. Not one tour went through that didn't get at least a little paranormal activity. Mostly it was shoulder tapping or whispering in the ear, but there were times when drums in Froston's room would begin playing themselves, and one rather belligerent skeptic almost got pushed down the stairs by a person that wasn't there. The whole affair was a giant success, and they continued to do Halloween tours in their house for years after. The notoriety caused by opening their house in such a way attracted some folks of an interesting nature. Chief among them were the couple Kate and Steve from Tulsa, who wanted to stay overnight in the house like it was some kind of bed and breakfast. Cindy vehemently denied them permission, even though Kate said money was no object. When asked about her motivations, Kate explained to Cindy that when she stays in a house that is actually haunted, the activity is magnified. Kate believed that she unintentionally amplifies paranormal activity by way of her higher vibration. Cindy was unsure of what she should do, so she asked Chris for his thoughts. He suggested that they set the price so high that nobody in their right mind would even consider accepting. When Kate called back, Cindy named her price, and without hesitation, Kate accepted. Cindy half expected this to happen and proceeded to lay down the ground rules. First and foremost, no illegal drugs or illicit substances. Second, if they break anything, they pay extra to replace it. The terms were accepted, and the following Saturday they arrived. Cindy didn't know what to expect when the doorbell rang that evening, but when she opened the door, two very normal people stood there. Cindy, feeling a little more relaxed, welcomed them inside. They had only been in the house for a matter of moments when a loud metallic screeching sound came from somewhere upstairs, followed by a very loud clicking sound. Kate's only response was two words: "It's starting." Cindy, regretting her decision, knew that she was in for a long night. Later, about an hour after Cindy crawled into bed, she felt something small join her. Whoever it was weighed less than either of her two children, letting her know instantly who it was. She asked the child spirit why they weren't in the other bedroom scaring the daylights out of her house guests. The absurdity of the situation did not escape her. Soon after, a strange knocking sound started to manifest from within all the walls of the house at once. The sound became so loud it shook the walls and windows and echoed through the halls. It sounded like someone was pounding their fists against the walls in a fit of rage. After about a half an hour of this, it went away. Finally, Cindy thought, I can get some sleep. Nope. Just as she was about to doze off again, somebody or something had suddenly released thousands of marbles or ball bearings onto the hardwood floor of the upstairs hallway. She could hear them rolling everywhere, going under the furniture, under doors, and bouncing down the stairs like Plinko chips. She peeked out her door, half expecting to see Kate and Steve having a laugh. Instead, she saw Steve peeking out of his room, eyes wide in terror. They both looked to the floor and saw nothing out of place. Before the morning came, some of Devereaux's dollies started asking for food, although, as usual, there were no batteries in them. And something that sounded like a tidal wave crashed over the house, but there was no water to be seen. After the house had finally settled down, Cindy quickly made breakfast, eager to see Kate and Steve on their way. Even though they confessed they were terrified the entire night, the couple asked Cindy about booking a room the following year. She declined instantly, and after they left, went upstairs to finally get some sleep. Through the years, the Back family has learned to live with the spirits that haunt their house. Fear, while not completely absent, has mostly given way to familiarity. Today they live in nearby Muskogee but still own the McBride house. The house is undergoing a complete overhaul, and since Devereaux has chronic health problems and can't be around the fumes and dust, they decided to stay in a temporary residence nearby. And although they warn every tradesman who agrees to work on their house that strange things will happen every day, it is not easy to keep any of them employed. If spirits can do all of that, they can pick up a broom and sweep something or clean the bathroom. If they're gonna stay, they're pitching in. And with that, episode 12 is complete. If you've made it this far, you have my heartfelt gratitude. I cannot thank you enough for choosing to listen to The Ghost Signal when there's so many others out there. Would you like to share your story? If you would, please visit theghostsignalpodcast.com and follow the link to email me, and I will put it in a future episode. If you would like to be one of us, visit www.patreon.com/The Ghost Signal Podcast to gain access to exclusive content, and join the Ghost Signal Discord server and hang out with other listeners from all across the globe. The Ghost Signal is executively produced by Jason Wilson. Custom sound beds by J.M. Scherf. Video editing wizardry by Hale. Creative direction by Cassie. Patreon mastery by Brooks Bigley. And my name is Jeff, your friendly control operator and your ghost host with the most. The next time the Ghost Signal haunts your eardrums, we will finally reach the conclusion of Stephen LeChance's Paranormal Odyssey in the final part of The House That Screams. So until then, dear listeners, spooks and specters, ending transmission. Reach me at theghostsignalpodcast@gmail.com.
This has been a Grey Rooms production. Copyright 2021 and 2022.
The ghost signal is lost. Transmission terminated.